Hey guys, it's Ryan from Hooktheory.com, and welcome back to part 2 in our first episode of our songwriting series, where we are writing songs from start to finish, from scratch in Hookpad. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, please check out the link below. And if, as always, if you're watching on YouTube or Vimeo and you'd prefer to watch on our site, click the second link below, where we have this video along with a copy of Hookpad with these chords loaded up so you can follow along. Okay, so where we left off last time is we came up with this chord progression. This is 2 8-bar phrases, and let's start by just listening to see how this sounds. We substituted this chord for a Mixolydian 5/7. Cadencing to our 4/7. Then we substituted the borrowed minor 4/7. And then falling down, scale degrees 3, 2 sharp, 2, 5, and then back to our 1. And I'm going to re-add that again. So let's go down here and add our 1/7. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to come up with a melody. So for our particular progression, because these chords are a little more complex, what we're going to find is the melody is going to be fairly forgiving. And really, this is a good lesson for all melody writing, is that the most important thing is really just to get something down. You can always kind of fiddle around with the notes later. You can fool around with the rhythms. This particular piece is going to be kind of a jazzy piece. It's designed to be played on a tenor saxophone. So ultimately, if I give this melody to someone to record, he or she might decide, well, let's take a little more time here. Let's change this note to that note. So the most important thing is really just to get started. Okay, so the second most important thing is that when people hear melodies, what they really like to hear is some sort of theme that repeats, because they like having these expectations for some sort of melodic idea that get realized. And the easiest way to do that is to come up with some sort of melodic idea and to repeat it. So let me show you how that's done. Okay, so let's start on a melody. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up with a very simple melodic phrase that's going to serve as the theme to this piece. And one nice thing when you're using kind of a little more complex harmony, like this major 7th chord, this 1/7, is really there's not a lot of notes that sound bad with this. So we have our stable scale degrees, 1, 3, 5, and 7. But it turns out that scale degrees 2 and 6, just because this is kind of already a fairly dissonant chord, are going to sound fine too. Really, the only scale degree that's going to not sound okay is scale degree 4, and I'll show you that. So let's just play some notes. How about I go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So hear how all of those notes kind of sound good on the major 7. Really, the only one that's a no-no is 4, which sounds like this. Pretty gross. All right, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a simple melodic theme, and I'm going to start on scale degree 5 and just run up the scale a little bit. And we'll come down and let's skip. So how about this? What this is doing is it's basically running up and down this scale a little bit, kind of noodling around on this 7 and 5, and we're landing on this 6. And you might ask, well, why would you land on a 6 when 6 is one of the scale degrees that's not in this 1 major 7? Well, like I said before, even though 6 and 2 aren't technically in the 1 major 7, because this is kind of a more complex sounding chord anyway, it's not going to sound wrong that the 6 is in there, as long as we don't use the 4, right? The 4 is the one note that really clashes with this chord. And also, because we're trying to create a melody that sounds a little more complex, having some scale degrees that aren't in the chord is one way of achieving that sound. So let's listen. Okay, so it's not bad. So, could you come up with something better than this? Probably. But again, I really want to stress that the most important thing is that you come up with kind of a melodic theme, and you really commit to it. So even though this might not be the greatest sounding melody, as long as we really commit to this idea, then as we go through this chord progression, our listeners are going to start expecting it. And as long as we give them this idea several times, it's going to sound like it belongs. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's move on. What I'm going to do is, because we want to kind of keep this theme, I'm just going to repeat this again. It's as simple as that. That's the easiest way to ensure that we're keeping kind of the same rhythmic and melodic themes. Now, because we're on a different chord, obviously we can't just verbatim use this, right? This chord now has, this 5/7/4 has a stable scale degree 7 flat, which is definitely not going to be good with our 6 and 7. We'll see how bad this sounds. Pretty bad, right? Okay, so what I'd like to do is I want to give this melody some sort of kind of an arc. So we started off a little low. Let's move the register up. So I'm going to move this up to scale degree 1. And let's see. One thing that I really want to emphasize is, remember how we chose this 5/7/4. The focus is going to be on this 4 chord, right? We're kind of landing on this 4 chord. So ending our theme right here in the middle of our cadence is not the greatest idea. What we'd really like is, we'd really like to push our melodic idea here, this 7 5 6 3 1 2, out to the 4 chord, because that's where our harmony is changing. So one thing we can do is, let's just keep going up this scale. I'll put a 5 here. And we need a few more notes to kind of extend this idea. Oops. Cut off my note there. Into this 4 chord. So let's add some notes. And why don't we push this a little out? How about that? Okay, so basically what I did here is I wanted to get this theme here onto our 4 chord. So that's why we're kind of prolonging this here. So let's hear how this sounds. Okay, so hear how we kind of preserved this melodic and rhythmic theme, but we kind of pushed it out to where we wanted it to occur on this 4 chord. Okay, so let's keep going. So because we've kind of established this theme, this kind of note and then skipping a note and coming back up and holding, this is going to be kind of like ingrained in our listener's mind. So repeating this again isn't going to hurt at all. In fact, to show that, we could just do this again. Why don't we just go up and repeat this again on the 4 chord. Okay, so we're really committing to this idea. Alright, so what we've done so far is pretty nice. We kind of started on this low scale degree 5 and created this nice kind of melodic arc. We started low, kind of came up to this 5, up to the 6, 5, then back down. So what we're going to need to do now is we kind of need to finish this idea. So one thing we can try to do is notice how the tempo of our chords is kind of accelerating, right? So we kind of had this 1-7 for 2 chords, 5-7-4 for 2 chords, 4-7 for 2 chords. And now look at this. Kind of 2 beats, 2 beats, 2 beats, and 2 beats. So each of these chords is now 1/4 of the duration of any of the previous chords. So one thing we can try to do is we can try to speed up the melody a little bit to kind of mimic this harmonic uptempo, and then fall back down into our 1-7 as we repeat. So what I'm going to try is let's kind of go back to the beginning of our arc and use some of these notes here and kind of go up the scale a little bit. So let's, I'm going to use some faster notes. So let's go 5, 6 like we did before. And let's do a 1. Because 1 is stable. See, 1 is stable both in the 1-6-5. It's not technically stable in the 7-3, but it doesn't clash with any of these notes. So it's kind of a good note. And then let's repeat this again. So let's use the 6, which is stable. We'll kind of sequence up. And then, let's see, let's go. And then let's come down. I want to kind of get back to this idea here, down here. So let's come down. How about that? Let's listen to this. Okay, so that actually sounded a lot better than I thought it was going to. Really one of the keys here is we're kind of ascending with this harmonic tempo. We're kind of making these notes faster. But then as we come back down the scale, remember that our listeners are expecting to hear this. So when we have a melody that's aiming toward that, and we give it to them, it's very satisfying. Right? Okay, great. So let's move on. So we could just repeat this again, but we're only writing 16 bars of music, so having 2 melodic lines that exactly repeat when our chords are very similar is probably not the best idea. So in addition to that, we have these chord changes here. And whenever you have a progression that you're basically repeating, but you've changed certain chords because you want to emphasize certain kind of harmonic differences, it's good to have a melody that really kind of complements that idea. And I'll show you what I mean here. So what we're going to do is, what I'd really like to do is emphasize this 5. And one really good way of doing that is if we have a melody that we want people to think that we're going to do this chord, but we hit them with this instead. So last time we kind of made this 5, scale degree 5 a focus. So what I'm going to do is let's kind of accelerate this a little bit. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's push this forward just a little bit. And this 5, we're going to hit the 5 before this chord. And this is going to be great. What it's going to do is the listener is going to hear this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're going to remember the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. And they're going to be expecting this chord. But instead, this 5 is just going to highlight this completely new chord, the Mixolydian 5/7. Let's listen to this. Right? Okay, so this is what we're expecting, right? Which would be great, but in my opinion, this is way better. So now they're going to be very, very surprised by this chord. So what we can do is let's just do exactly the same thing, but this time let's give them what they expected the first time. This 5/7/04. Okay, great. And now let's give them something familiar. So let's go back to this melodic idea. And and this is another great thing. Okay, so here we hear this 3/1/2 on the 4, and then remember, the last time we just repeated this verbatim. So what they're going to be expecting is exactly the same thing, but we're throwing them this curveball, right? We're doing this minor 7. So what we can do is instead of giving them the 3, we can accentuate this by making this a 3 flat. And actually, we need to do something, right? Because the 3 is not going to work on this chord anyway, because it's not in this chord. And it would really clash with that 3 flat. So we can do this instead. All right, so let's listen to this. Okay, so let's move on. So let's start by just copying this. We won't use this, of course, because we need to do something a little different, but it'll provide us with a good baseline. So this was a nice idea. This really worked well the last time. So I'd like to keep that as much as we can, but let's do something a little different. So instead of going down to the 5, this time let's move this up. I'll go 2, 3, 5. Of course, this is going to work. 3 and 5 are stable. And let's go up to the 6. Let's just actually move this all up an octave, because this worked so well last time. And we'll go 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 7, 1. So, okay, so let's actually, I know we're working on melody here, but I have another good idea for chords. So this is another great technique to use. Right here, we are definitely expecting the 1, right? Because, well, first of all, we did it already. We did this 2/7/5/7/1. 2/7/5/7. We're expecting this 1. It's the end of the piece. It's clear that it's the end of the piece. Strong cadence, 5/7. So why don't we not give them the 1? So the most deceptive thing you can do when you're ending a progression is to basically fake going to the 1 and actually give them a very specific chord, which is you give them a 6 chord that's borrowed from the minor mode. And this is actually known in classical music as a deceptive cadence. It's actually called a deceptive cadence because it's so deceiving. So the reason why this flat 6 is so effective is that it actually has scale degree 1 in it. So if your melody is going to land on scale degree 1, you can still do that as if you were going to your regular 1. You can still land on 1, but you just go to your flat 6 chord instead. So what I'm going to do is, let's see. I want to prolong this a little bit. Let's prolong this 2. And then I'm going to do 1, 2, and what everyone's going to expect is something like this. 3, 2, 1 on a 1 chord. But instead, we're going to give them flat 3, right? We can't use 3 because we have a flat 3 in here, to the 1. Okay, so let's hear how this sounds. Okay, that's pretty good. I'd like to change the rhythms around just a little bit so it doesn't sound quite as much like the first time. So let's shorten this. I'm going to actually make this 2 hit on the beat, because since we hit before the beat and we hit on the beat, it kind of makes it feel like something's about to happen. So let's shorten this, and we'll do the same thing here. Okay, let's try that. Okay, I like that. Except for now, this 5 doesn't sound very good on this chord. So let's move this. Let's change this a little bit. Let's go up first to the 6-1, and then we'll kind of pause on this 1 and then do it again. This will kind of give more momentum to this 2 here. Let's try that. Okay. Yeah, I think that works pretty well. Okay, so let's listen to our whole progression again. Okay, so I hope you guys got the basic idea of how we sketched out that melody. So the keys were really that we came up with a melodic idea and we committed to it, right? So that one musical phrase we probably repeated 4 or 5 times at least in this 16 measures. Then the points when we had really interesting harmonies, so we had chords that we really wanted to emphasize. For instance, the time we substituted that Mixolydian 5/7 for the 5/7 of 4, we created a melody that really kind of helps to accentuate that by going to that scale degree 5 and having the listener expect that we're going to go to the 5/7 of 4, and then we give them this swapped Mixolydian 5/7 instead. So those are really good tricks for really creating an interesting melody. It's making sure that your melody complements your chord progression and that you're repeating these melodic themes over and over again. So I know it doesn't sound like much right now, but I promise you that once we get these on real instruments, it's going to be great. So stay tuned for part 3, where I will take this and put this into Logic, and we'll make some real music. All right, see you soon.